There's something sitting in your kitchen right now that most doctors never talk about. It's not a supplement, it's not a medication, it's not something you need to order online or find at a specialty store. It's already on your shelf. It's been there for years. And there's a good chance you've been walking right past it every single morning without knowing what it can do for your blood sugar. Today we're talking about 5 spices, ordinary everyday spices, that have been studied for their effect on insulin resistance. And the research behind some of these is genuinely remarkable. Now, I want to be upfront with you from the start. These spices are not a cure. They are not a replacement for your medication. They are not going to undo decades of metabolic dysfunction overnight. But as part of a consistent daily routine used alongside the dietary and lifestyle changes we've talked about in this series, they can make a real measurable difference. Some of them have been shown in clinical studies to lower fasting blood sugar, improve insulin sensitivity, and reduce inflammation in the body. And the best part? They cost almost nothing. They have no dangerous side effects at normal culinary doses, and adding them to your food takes about 10 seconds. Let's talk about what insulin resistance actually is, so you understand why these spices matter. And then we'll go through each one carefully. You've heard me use the phrase insulin resistance before, but let me make sure it's crystal clear because everything else today builds on this. Insulin is the hormone your pancreas releases every time glucose enters your bloodstream. Its job is to act like a key, unlocking the doors of your cells so glucose can enter and be used as fuel. In a healthy body, this system works smoothly. You eat, insulin is released, glucose enters the cells, blood sugar comes back down. But when cells are exposed to too much insulin over too long a period, which happens with years of high sugar, high carbohydrate eating, chronic stress, poor sleep, and physical inactivity, something starts to change. The cells begin to ignore the signal. Imagine knocking on a door. At first, someone answers immediately. But if you knock on that door 50 times a day, every day, for years, eventually the person inside stops coming to the door. They've tuned you out. That's insulin resistance. The cells stop responding to insulin's signal. The pancreas tries to compensate by producing even more insulin. Blood sugar stays elevated. The liver overproduces glucose, and the whole system becomes strained. This is the underlying condition behind type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, and a whole range of metabolic problems including high blood pressure, weight gain around the abdomen, and chronic fatigue. Now here's the important part. Insulin resistance is not permanent. It is not irreversible. The cells can become sensitive to insulin again. It takes time, consistency, and the right inputs. But it can happen, and certain spices appear to help accelerate that process. Let me show you how. The first spice is one you almost certainly already have. It's cinnamon. I've mentioned cinnamon briefly in previous videos, but today I want to go deeper because this spice has more research behind it than almost any other natural compound studied for blood sugar. Here's what cinnamon does at a biological level. Cinnamon contains a compound called cinnamaldehyde. That's what gives it its distinctive smell and flavor. Cinnamaldehyde has been shown to activate certain proteins inside muscle cells that mimic the action of insulin. In other words, it helps glucose get into the cells even when insulin sensitivity is reduced. It also slows the rate at which the stomach empties food into the small intestine. A slower gastric emptying means glucose enters the bloodstream more gradually, which means a smaller, gentler blood sugar spike after meals. A meta-analysis, that's a study that combines the results of many individual studies, published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, found that cinnamon supplementation was associated with a significant reduction in fasting blood glucose levels. The average reduction across studies was around 11%. Now 11% may not sound dramatic, but for someone whose fasting glucose is sitting at 140, an 11% reduction brings that number to around 125. That is a clinically meaningful shift. How do you use it? Half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon per day is the amount most studies used. You can stir it into your morning coffee or tea, sprinkle it on plain yogurt, add it to a smoothie, mix it into oatmeal or chia pudding. One important note, there are 2 types of cinnamon. Ceylon cinnamon, sometimes called true cinnamon, and cassia cinnamon, which is the more common, cheaper variety found in most grocery stores. At culinary doses, a teaspoon a day, both are generally safe. But if you plan to use cinnamon consistently over the long term, Ceylon cinnamon is the preferred option because it contains lower levels of a compound called coumarin, which in very large amounts can affect the liver. Check the label when you buy. Ceylon cinnamon will often say Ceylon or true cinnamon on the package. The second spice is turmeric, and specifically the active compound inside turmeric called curcumin. Turmeric is that golden yellow spice used in curries and traditional medicine across South Asia for thousands of years. Modern science has spent the last 2 decades studying why traditional practitioners used it so extensively, and one of the most significant findings is its effect on inflammation. Here's the connection to insulin resistance. Chronic low-grade inflammation is both a cause and a consequence of insulin resistance. When your fat cells, especially the fat stored around the abdomen, become overfull, they start releasing inflammatory signals into the bloodstream. Those inflammatory signals interfere with insulin's ability to communicate with cells. They essentially jam the signal. Curcumin has powerful anti-inflammatory properties. Multiple studies have shown it can reduce levels of inflammatory markers in the blood, compounds like TNF-alpha and interleukin-6 that are consistently elevated in people with insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. But curcumin also appears to have a more direct effect. Research published in the journal Diabetes Care found that curcumin supplementation significantly improved insulin sensitivity and reduced fasting blood sugar in participants with prediabetes. In one well-known 9-month study, none of the participants taking curcumin progressed from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes, compared to 16% of those taking a placebo. That is a striking result. How do you use it? Add half a teaspoon of turmeric to soups, stews, scrambled eggs, or roasted vegetables. Make a golden milk, warm milk with turmeric, a pinch of black pepper, and a little cinnamon. And that black pepper is not optional. It contains a compound called piperine, which increases the absorption of curcumin by up to 2,000%. Turmeric without black pepper is absorbed very poorly. Always combine them. The third spice is ginger. Ginger has been used medicinally for over 5,000 years. It's warming, aromatic, and most people associate it with digestive health. But its benefits for blood sugar are significant and increasingly well documented. Ginger contains bioactive compounds called gingerols and shogols. These compounds have been shown to do something very specific. They activate a protein called GLUT4, which is essentially a glucose transporter. GLUT4 sits in the membrane of muscle cells and fat cells. When it's activated, it pulls glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cell, even when insulin signaling is impaired. Think of it as opening a side door into the cell. When the main door, the insulin pathway, is stuck, ginger helps open another entrance. A randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found that participants with type 2 diabetes who took ginger for 12 weeks showed significant reductions in fasting blood sugar, significant improvements in insulin sensitivity, and reductions in HbA1c, which is the measure of average blood sugar over 3 months. The reductions weren't massive, but they were consistent and statistically meaningful. How do you use it? Fresh ginger grated into hot water makes a simple tea. Add it to stir-fries, soups, or marinades. Ginger powder works well stirred into yogurt or oatmeal. Even a small amount, a quarter to half a teaspoon of powder, or a thin slice of fresh ginger consumed daily adds up over time. Ginger also has the bonus benefit of reducing nausea and supporting digestion, which makes it particularly useful for people whose medications sometimes cause stomach upset. The fourth spice is fenugreek. Now this one is less familiar to most people, but bear with me, because the research behind fenugreek and blood sugar is some of the strongest we have for any spice on this list. Fenugreek is a plant native to the Mediterranean and South Asia. The seeds have a slightly bitter, maple-like flavor. They're used extensively in Indian cooking and traditional Ayurvedic medicine. Here's what makes fenugreek particularly interesting for blood sugar. The seeds are extraordinarily high in soluble fiber, specifically a type of fiber called galactomannan. This fiber forms a thick, gel-like substance in your digestive tract, and that gel physically slows down the digestion and absorption of carbohydrates. It acts like a natural speed bump for glucose entering the bloodstream. But fenugreek doesn't stop there. It also contains a unique amino acid called 4-hydroxyisoleucine, which appears to directly stimulate insulin secretion from the pancreas. So it's working on two fronts simultaneously, slowing glucose absorption and improving insulin response. A study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that people with type 2 diabetes who consumed fenugreek seeds daily for 8 weeks showed significant reductions in fasting blood glucose, post-meal blood sugar, and total cholesterol. Another study found that soaking fenugreek seeds overnight and drinking the water in the morning on an empty stomach produced a meaningful reduction in morning glucose levels over time. How do you use it? Fenugreek seeds can be ground into a powder and added to soups, stews, or curries. You can find fenugreek powder at most Indian grocery stores and increasingly at larger supermarkets. 1 teaspoon of ground fenugreek added to your cooking is a practical daily dose. The soaked seed method is also worth trying. 1 teaspoon of seeds soaked in a glass of water overnight, then drink the water in the morning. The taste is slightly bitter, but it's manageable and the potential benefit is real. The fifth spice is black seed. You may also know it by its other name, Nigella sativa, or simply black cumin. This one has been used in traditional medicine across the Middle East and North Africa for centuries. In fact, it was found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, and it appears in ancient texts as a remedy for a remarkable range of conditions. Modern science has started to catch up with that ancient wisdom. Black seed contains a compound called thymoquine, and thymoquinone has shown impressive effects on several of the mechanisms that drive insulin resistance. First, it reduces oxidative stress, which is essentially cellular damage caused by unstable molecules called free radicals. Oxidative stress is strongly linked to insulin resistance, particularly in the pancreas, where it can damage the cells that produce insulin. Second, it has been shown to reduce inflammation through multiple pathways, similar to turmeric but through different mechanisms, which means they can complement each other. Third, several studies have shown that thymoquinone improves insulin sensitivity directly. A clinical trial published in the Journal of Endocrinology and Metabolism found that black seed supplementation for 12 weeks significantly reduced fasting blood glucose, post-meal blood sugar, and HbA1c in patients with type 2 diabetes. Another study found that black seed oil reduced insulin resistance markers in participants with metabolic syndrome. How do you use it? Black seeds have a slightly peppery herbal flavor. They can be sprinkled on bread before baking, added to salads, stirred into yogurt, or blended into smoothies. Black seed oil is also available and can be taken by the teaspoon or added to dressings. A typical dose used in studies is between 1 and 3 grams of seeds per day, roughly half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. Start small and see how your body responds. Now let me pull all 5 together because I want to give you something practical you can actually use. 5 spices: cinnamon, turmeric, ginger, fenugreek, and black seed. You don't need to use all 5 every single day. You don't need to force yourself to eat things you genuinely dislike. The goal is consistency over time, not perfection on any given day. Here's a simple framework. In the morning, half a teaspoon of cinnamon in your coffee or yogurt, a pinch of turmeric and black pepper in your scrambled eggs or tea. At lunch or dinner, ginger and turmeric in your cooking. Fenugreek powder added to soups or stews. Before bed or in the morning, fenugreek water if you choose to try it. Over weeks and months, these small additions create a cumulative effect. The inflammation comes down gradually. Insulin sensitivity improves gradually. Your cells start responding better to insulin's signal. The door opens more easily. This is not dramatic. It doesn't happen in 3 days, but the research suggests it is real and it is meaningful, particularly when combined with the other habits we've discussed: eating earlier, choosing slow carbohydrates, walking after meals, managing evening stress. All of these things work together. Each one moves the needle a little. Together they move it a lot. One more thing before I close, and I want to say this clearly. If you are on medication for diabetes, metformin, glipizide, insulin, or anything else, do not stop or reduce your medication based on anything you hear in this video or any other. Blood sugar management is serious. Abrupt changes in medication without medical supervision can be dangerous. What I am encouraging you to do is bring this information to your doctor. Tell them you want to try incorporating some of these spices into your daily routine. Ask them to monitor your levels over the following weeks. If your numbers improve, and they may, your doctor can help you determine if any medication adjustments are appropriate. That conversation is worth having. Your doctor wants you to be healthy. Give them the opportunity to work with you. Now, if someone you care about is struggling with blood sugar, with insulin resistance, with the frustration of a body that doesn't seem to be responding no matter what they do, please share this video with them. The information we covered today is the kind of thing that rarely comes up in a standard 15-minute doctor's appointment, but it can genuinely change how someone approaches their daily routine. Share it, it costs nothing and might mean everything to someone who needs it. Next week, we're going to tackle something that connects everything we've discussed in this series: the relationship between poor sleep and blood sugar. Because here's what most people don't realize. Sleeping badly raises your blood sugar directly. It increases cortisol, it decreases insulin sensitivity, it makes everything harder, and there are specific things you can do starting tonight to break that cycle. If you don't want to miss it, subscribe now and hit the bell. It takes 1 second and it means you won't have to go looking for it when it comes out. I'm Dr. Sterling. Take care of yourself tonight. I'll see you next week.